The door swings open. Two figures appear in the frame. One word, hello. An entire studio erupts. They weren't supposed to last more than a few episodes. They weren't even supposed to have those names. And for years, the two women who shared the screen with them, Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall, stayed quiet about what really went on behind the cameras. But the truth about Lenny and Squiggy is far wilder than any script they ever performed. It involved a living room in Los Angeles, a last-minute name change, a producer's secret formula, and two women fighting every single day not to burst out laughing. This is the full untold story, straight from the people who were there. Before the leather jackets, before the catchphrases, before that thunderous hello, that became one of the most recognized entrances in television history. Lenny and Squiggy were just two guys at a party. It was the early 1970s. Penny Marshall and her then-husband Rob Reiner were known for hosting. Writers, actors, comedians. Their living room was a gathering place for some of the sharpest comic minds in Los Angeles. On one particular evening, two guests walked in who would quietly change the course of American sitcom history, David Lander and Michael McKean. Both men were already known in comedy circles through The Credibility Gap, a Los Angeles-based sketch comedy and musical satire group with a devoted cult following. Their timing was sharp, their chemistry natural, and their instincts for improvisation were almost frightening in how good they were. But nobody expected what happened next. At some point during that casual evening, Lander and McKean simply became someone else. Without warning, without prompting, they slipped into character. Two exaggerated, oddball, deeply lovable goofballs with strange accents, nervous physical tics, and a comedic rhythm between them that seemed completely impossible to manufacture. They didn't need encouragement, Penny Marshall later recalled. They just went into it. The room fell apart. Every person in that living room was laughing, and Penny, already developing Laverne and Shirley with her brother, producer Gary Marshall, saw something immediately. This wasn't just a party trick. This was lightning. Cindy Williams, who was also in the room that night, later described the energy Lander and McKean created as something almost physical. Their comedy didn't just land, it filled the space. They had this rhythm, she said. They'd bounce off each other like they'd been doing it forever. It wasn't just funny, it was electric. The following day, Penny picked up the phone and called her brother. You have to see these two. No formal audition was arranged. No lengthy casting process. David Lander and Michael McKean were simply invited to the set, and they walked in and did exactly what they had done in Penny's living room. They owned the space. They made everyone stop what they were doing and laugh, without being able to help it. It was like catching lightning in a bottle, Cindy said years later. They always came, got their laughs, and left. Every single time. What began as an impromptu performance at a house party became the foundation of one of the most beloved comedic duos in television history. And it happened not in a casting room or a writer's meeting, but in a crowded Los Angeles living room, on an ordinary night when two performers slipped into character and never really came back out. Here's something most fans of Laverne and Shirley never knew. The character the world came to love as Squiggy almost never existed at all. In the earliest version of the show's concept, the duo was known as Lenny and Anthony. Anthony was conceived as an Italian neighborhood guy. Same energy, same comedic pairing, but an entirely different identity. On paper, it made sense. These were Milwaukee working-class characters. Italian-American communities were woven into the fabric of the show's world. But there was a problem. There were too many Italians already, Penny Marshall said plainly. She wasn't wrong. Between Phil Foster's Frank DeFazio, Eddie Mecca's Carmine Ragusa, and the broader Italian-American flavor already running through the show, the producers recognized that adding another Italian character would crowd an already rich palette. A creative decision was made, and it was the right one. Anthony was out. Andrew Squiggman was born. It sounds like a small change. It wasn't. The name Squiggy did something that Anthony never could. It was immediately, instinctively funny. Strange, snappy, cartoonish. It popped off the tongue in a way that prepared audiences for chaos before the character even appeared on screen. Paired against the simpler, everyman sound of Lenny, the combination was comic gold. The moment they were Lenny and Squiggy, it just made sense, Cindy Williams said. The audience already knew they were in trouble the second they heard the names. The rewrite also freed the characters from any ethnic or geographic limitations. Squiggy became vaguely Germanic, perhaps Eastern European, but the truth is, it didn't matter. Their identity wasn't rooted in background or heritage. It was rooted in pure, undiluted oddness. They existed in a world slightly adjacent to everyone else's reality, which made them infinitely more versatile as characters. For the writers, it was a gift. Lenny and Squiggy could now drift in and out of storylines with virtually no justification required. They didn't need a reason to knock on that door. They just appeared and chaos followed. Even Lenny's full surname, Kosnowski, was engineered for laughter. Penny Marshall once joked that Kosnowski translated loosely to "help, there's a hog in my kitchen," a description that perfectly captured the absurd warmth that defined the pair at every turn. Their very names were constructed for comedy. Long, heavy syllables crashing against short, sharp sounds. What initially seemed like a minor creative reshuffling turned out to be one of the most consequential decisions in sitcom history. The moment those names were set, the characters were fully alive, and everything else clicked into place around them. Penny Marshall brought David Lander and Michael McKean to her brother knowing they were funny. But Gary Marshall saw something more specific. He saw the missing piece of a structural puzzle he'd been quietly solving. Gary approached sitcom, building the way an architect approaches a blueprint. Every character served a function. Every dynamic existed for a reason. And his core philosophy was built around contrast, what he privately called his comedy ladder. The concept was straightforward. In a great sitcom, you need characters at different rungs. People striving upward, people holding steady, and people so far below the rung that everyone else looks competent by comparison. Not out of cruelty, out of architecture. Laverne and Shirley were already brilliantly placed. Two working-class women from Milwaukee, full of dreams, constantly bumping up against the ceiling of their circumstances. Relatable, lovable, and genuinely funny. But even lovable underdogs, Gary understood, need someone to feel slightly superior to. Someone's got to be worse than you, he said. Lenny and Squiggy were that someone, and they were magnificent at it. Their function wasn't just to deliver jokes. It was to calibrate the emotional temperature of every episode. When the story got heavy, they burst through the door and reset the room. When Laverne and Shirley felt overwhelmed by life's disappointments, one appearance by the guys from downstairs reminded the audience that things could always be stranger. Cindy Williams described Gary as a mathematician of laughs. He knew where to place the joke, how long to let it land, and when to get out before it went stale. With Lenny and Squiggy, that math was precise. Their appearances were deliberately short, sharp, and explosive, in laugh out, because Gary knew that overstaying would blunt their impact. They were the comedic pressure valves. You couldn't have them in every scene. You had to make the audience want them, and then deliver just enough. The balance worked because Laverne and Shirley were real. Their flaws, their dreams, their heartbreaks, all of it grounded the show. And Lenny and Squiggy, orbiting around that gravitational center, made the girls look almost heroic by comparison. Not because they were villains, but because their chaotic goodness threw everything else into sharper relief. Michael McKean once summed it up with characteristic wit. We were the bottom of the ladder, but we loved being there. Gary wouldn't have had it any other way. The ladder only worked if every rung held weight, and at the bottom, Lenny and Squiggy held theirs with a grin, a stumble, and one perfectly timed word. Some moments in television history are felt before they're seen. For millions of Laverne and Shirley fans, the moment was always the same: the soft creak of a door, a half-second of silence, and then hello. It didn't matter what the episode had been about up to that point. Tears, arguments, heartbreak, confusion. The instant Lenny and Squiggy appeared, every emotion in the room shifted to pure, helpless laughter. That entrance was not an accident. It was an art form. Gary Marshall ran his sets on rhythm. Every glance, every pause, every gesture had to hit its mark. But what Lander and McKean brought to their entrances went beyond technical precision. It was instinct honed to a razor's edge through years of working together. Lenny stood tall, goofy grin already loaded, body language radiating oblivious confidence. Squiggy barreled in slightly behind him, chin raised, shoulders forward, voice pitched somewhere between a sneer and an affectionate whine. Every physical detail was intentional. The pause before they spoke, barely a heartbeat, was engineered to build just enough anticipation. Then, boom. They made that entrance look like an accident, Cindy Williams said. But it was a science. They knew exactly how to walk in, how long to wait, when to pause, and when to speak. It was genius. Penny Marshall said the audience would begin laughing the moment the door creaked. Not when Lenny and Squiggy appeared, when the door creaked. That was how deeply their rhythm had been absorbed into the show's DNA. The door itself had become a comedic signal. McKean later revealed that he and Lander occasionally experimented with the silence, swinging the door open and simply standing there, no dialogue, no movement. Just the two of them, looking at the audience. And the audience would laugh anyway. That was the moment we knew we had them, he said. For Cindy and Penny, those entrances were simultaneously a gift and a daily battle. Their job was to stay in character, to keep Laverne and Shirley real. While two of the most naturally funny performers in the business attempted, with every appearance, to make them lose it completely. Penny's standing instruction to herself before certain scenes: don't look at them. Just don't. Because one look was all it took. Being the stars of a hit sitcom is one thing. Being the anchors while controlled chaos unfolds around you, that's a different skill entirely. Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall were, above all else, professionals. And in the world of Laverne and Shirley, that professionalism was tested every single shooting day. When Lander and McKean improvised, and they did constantly, there were no guarantees about what would come out of their mouths. I almost bit a hole through my tongue trying not to laugh, Penny said once. It wasn't hyperbole. The crew behind the cameras had the same problem. Sound, mixers, camera operators, directors, everyone was fighting the same battle. The women developed what Cindy called emotional armor. They went into every scene expecting the unexpected, bracing themselves against whatever Lander or McKean might add, subtract, or invent on the spot. Their strategy was stillness. While Lenny and Squiggy crashed through scenes like a weather event, Laverne and Shirley learned to be the calm in the storm. They reacted just enough, a perfectly timed glance between them, half exhaustion and half disbelief, and let the reaction become the punchline. They didn't need to compete. Their restraint was the comedy. If we broke every time or let the world carry us away, Laverne and Shirley wouldn't be real anymore, Cindy said. And if they weren't real, the audience wouldn't care.